Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, we have an announcement. Byju's Exam Prep IAS will be launching a new initiative called as Target Means 2022 from today. This will be live on our YouTube channel for today and tomorrow, but for the rest of the other days, this is exclusively available on the Byju's Exam Prep application. So please do tune in from 7:30 to 9 p.m. and this will be with respect to the Target Means 2022. So all the important topics with respect to the mains examination covering important questions from the UPSC examination point of view will be added as part of this preparation, and this will be a 3 month intensive revision and practice program which will be discussed by some of the distinguished members of the Byju's UPSC faculty. So please do tune in from 7:30 to 9 p.m. and this will be exclusively available on our Byju's Exam Prep application. So what are you waiting for? Download the application and watch these lectures delivered with respect to the mains topic. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the Financial Action Task Force and the Pakistan's position on its grey list. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. The article here is speaking about the Financial Action Task Force. What is this Financial Action Task Force? Let's assume for a moment there is a country. This country has state actors and it may also have the non-state actors as well. The state actors or the non-state actors may engage in money laundering issues, may engage in terror financing issues, or they might not respect the international financial system as well. As a result, you required one of the organizations which is able to monitor whether that country has any of the contributions in the illegal acknowledgement of the international financial system. So we required one of the institutions to monitor that institution or a country which is engaging in illegal financing. So what we have is called as the Financial Action Task Force. So if there is a country which is engaging in money laundering or it is supporting illegal practices and that is going to harm the international financial transaction, it will be monitored by the Financial Action Task Force. So what is this Financial Action Task Force? It is an intergovernmental organization established to set standards, promote effective implementation of legal, regulatory and operational measures for combating money laundering, terrorist financing and other related threats to the integrity of the financial system. It was formed back in the year 1989 by the G7 summit which was held in Paris. The FATF is a policy making body that works with the governments to bring about national legislation and regulatory reforms in these areas. So if a particular country has some of the illegal paradigms that are established which is violating the money laundering rules and regulations, the Financial Action Task Force will identify the loopholes, plug these loopholes and ultimately ensure that there are rules that are prescribed and these countries will have to follow these prescribed rules. So basically it conducts the regular peer reviewed evaluations called as the mutual evaluation of countries to check their performance on standards prescribed by it. What do we mean by it? As we just discussed, if there is a particular country which is engaging in money laundering issues or terrorist financing issues or it is engaged in illegal transactions which is harming the international financial system, in that particular case what will a country do? A country will have to follow certain rules and regulations as prescribed by the Financial Action Task Force. So the Financial Action Task Force will clearly lay some rules and regulations which that country will have to follow. How will this particular report be taken up? We have what is called as the mutual evaluations. What is this mutual evaluation? Let's say for example there is a country. Let's assume for a moment there is Pakistan. What happens in Pakistan? There are few non-state actors, terrorist organizations, which are also set as terrorist organization by the United Nations. These non-state actors will ultimately have to be brought under the law books. But what does Pakistan do? It does not heed to these rules and regulations, and ultimately it will be monitored by the Financial Action Task Force. So you have member countries. Let's say for example you have Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan or any other countries in the Asia Pacific region, they may peer review. What do we mean by peer review? So these countries will visit Pakistan. They will see if the prescribed rules given by the Financial Action Task Force is followed by Pakistan or not. So ideally, they have the problems with respect to money laundering. So certain rules are given to them, but if these rules are not implemented, a review will be conducted by the peer countries, that is countries in and around the Asia Pacific region, and ultimately they would give what is called as the mutual evaluation reports. If this mutual evaluation report goes on to say that despite giving all these guidelines, rules and permissions to Pakistan or to any other country, they are not implementing it, that is when Financial Action Task Force will put up an action plan and may put them in one of the lists. So basically, the Financial Action Task Force mutual evaluations are the in-depth reports analyzing the implementation and effectiveness of measures to combat money laundering and terrorist financing. So basically, a peer review will be done, and if that particular country is not meeting the established parameters, certain actions will be initiated by the Financial Action Task Force. So what will the Financial Action Task Force do? There are two lists. One is what is called as the Financial Action Task Force Grey List. This is also called as jurisdictions under increased monitoring. Then we also have Financial Action Task Force Blacklist, which means high risk jurisdictions subject to call for action. What is this grey list? Let's assume for a moment there is one of the country. This country has certain rules and regulations which the Financial Action Task Force has prescribed, but this country has followed some of the rules and regulations, but it is not completely following. In that particular case, this country will be put in what is called as the Financial Action Task Force. So grey list country is that particular country which has taken some steps but not all steps in combating money laundering or illegal financing as well. So what is a grey list country? It is that particular country which is put in the grey list by the Financial Action Task Force because it is not able to keep up to the standards established by the Financial Action Task Force. Then we have something called as the blacklist. What is this blacklist? These are the countries which have completely neglected all the standards and the guidelines given by the Financial Action Task Force. This basically means that this can also be broadly categorized into two forms. One, that particular country may not have enough infrastructure. One is that possibility. The other possibility is that despite having the infrastructure, despite giving all these guidelines and standards, these countries are not ready to implement the Financial Action Task Force guidelines. So on one side, a blacklist country is that which is not ready to implement any of these rules and guidelines. As part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section which are the countries which are present in the Financial Action Task Force blacklist. So remember, we have grey list where these are the countries which are complying with few and not complying with many, and then we have blacklist where these are the countries which are not ready to comply with any of the rules and regulations as prescribed by the Financial Action Task Force. Now what exactly is happening? We have Pakistan which is currently put up in the grey list. Why is Pakistan currently put up in this particular list? That is because of multiple issues that are surfacing in Pakistan. Pakistan was retained in the grey list or list of countries under the increased monitoring because it was unsuccessful in prosecuting the top leadership of United Nations Security Council designated terror groups. The list includes Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Qaeda and Taliban. So there are few non-state actors. These non-state actors are the terrorist organizations. They are also defined so, they are also said so by the United Nations Security Council as well. Despite United Nations categorizing them as the terrorist organization, we have Pakistan which has not prosecuted these terrorist organizations. In fact, number of ways have been given to Pakistan to overcome this particular issue. Time after time, they have been put on the grey list as well. They have been asked to change their policies towards the non-state actors. despite giving repeated warnings, they are not ready to change, which is why they are kept in the monitoring list, and that is the primary reason they are put in the grey list. Now, if you have to look into the data from the past, Pakistan has found itself on the grey list frequently since the year 2008 for weaknesses in fighting terror financing and money laundering. In 2009, the country began to cooperate with Financial Action Task Force like regional bodies, Asia Pacific Group for a ME process. It was taken off the list in 2015 owing to some progress that was made, but again put back in this list in 2018. It was given a 27-point action plan to restrict terror financing activities, but Pakistan does not implement them. After warnings and two deadline extensions on the first plan, Pakistan was prescribed another 7-point action plan by the APG in 2021, focused specifically on combating money laundering. Despite these repeated warnings, Pakistan does not change, and in March 2022, Pakistan informed Financial Action Task Force that it completed 32 of the total 34 action items in the two plans but was still retained on the list. The Financial Action Task Force gave it time till January 2023 to complete its 2021 plan. So what we basically see is that Pakistan is not changing its operations when it comes to these non-state actors, and as a result they are placed in the Financial Action Task Force grey list. But what does Pakistan say? Pakistan says that it has taken up number of initiatives as well. What are those? It has put Hafiz Saeed behind the bar, it has prosecuted Masood Azhar, it has arrested about 300 other designated terrorists, and there is seizure of more than 1100 properties that are owned by these terrorist organizations. But what has India said? India has said yes, Pakistan may have taken these measures. Pakistan in the past has also taken measures as well, but this is only up till Pakistan is taken out of the grey list. But the minute it is out of the grey list, it continues to perpetuate same policies, said India. In fact, there are other countries who have also supported this particular claim as well, and which is why Pakistan continues to be monitored in the grey list as per the recent update. Now the question is, what is the impact if a particular country happens to be designated as a grey list? In this particular situation, we have Pakistan, which is in the grey list. So let's look at what would be the likely impact if a particular country is placed in this grey list. So if a particular country is placed in the grey list, inclusion in this particular list is not food for the country. That is because its global reputation could be at stake. So there would be a negative image about that particular country, and this will also portray a bad image, and as a result many countries would start doubting about the reputation of this country. And as a result, what would happen? There would be direct monitoring, intense scrutiny by all the international cooperation review groups on terror financing, and most of the countries would not be ready to do business with Pakistan because they may feel if Pakistan is not able to take care of the non-state actors, there will be law and order problem issues, there will be human right violations as well. If business starts operating in Pakistan, there could be threat to the businesses as well. So businesses may also not be opting to work in Pakistan, and this could be cost of doing business will also increase in Pakistan as well. Added to it, no company wants to do business because this money, if it goes to the terrorist organizations, it may further increase human right violations in the country. Foreign loans will be difficult to achieve. They may not get foreign loans from multiple other countries as well. We have the International Monetary Fund, we have the World Bank, we have the Asian Development Bank. They may not provide the loans to Pakistan with an apprehension that if money is given to Pakistan, it may be diverted to the terrorist related activities. This would also worsen the macroeconomic position of Pakistan. Why? Because they're not getting the loans. The economy would be in deep crisis, and as a result, there would be deep trade deficit and falling foreign exchange reserves as well. And lastly, when this particular country is going through all this crisis, you would also have Pakistan's debt rating, which would also fall, and ultimately the country could suffer as well. These are the possible impacts if a particular country is put in the Financial Action Task Force grey list. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the organization of the Islamic cooperation. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. When we speak about organization of Islamic cooperation, this happens to be an international organization which was founded back in the year 1969. It consists of 57 member states with a collective population of 1.5 billion as of 2015, with 53 countries being Muslim majority countries. The organization states that it is the collective voice of the Muslim world and works to safeguard and protect the interests of the Muslim world in promoting international peace and harmony. From the preliminary examination point of view, remember this has headquartered in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. But in the near future, they are also planning to move this organization permanently to the headquarters in the East Jerusalem if this particular place is liberated, and this organization also feels that Israel will also have to be accountable for all the war crimes and violations of the international law. The OIC has permanent delegations to the United Nations and the European Union. The official languages of OIC include Arabic, English as well as French. What are the goals of the OIC? According to its charter, the OIC aims to preserve Islamic social and economic values, promote solidarity among member states, increase cooperation in socio-economic, cultural, scientific and political areas, uphold international peace and security, and advance education, particularly in the fields of science and technology. What is the charter of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation? When we look into this particular charter, it is how this particular organization will adopt, what this organization intends to do, what are the principles that it has adopted for its functioning. This was first adopted back in the year 1972. The charter has been revised multiple times in line with emerging conditions in the developing world. The present charter was adopted in March 2008 at Dhaka in Senegal. It enshrines that all members be guided and inspired by the noble Islamic teachings and values alongside committing themselves to the purposes and principles of the United Charter. So apart from the charter that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has, there is in parallel the United Nations Charter as well. Respect and observance of these principles will also be taken into consideration. Member states are expected to uphold and promote good governance, democracy, human rights, fundamental freedom and the rule of law, settling disputes through peaceful means and refraining from use of threat or force. So if there are any dispute between the members, all of these will be settled amicably and peacefully via the resolution process, and they will not use of force in this particular backdrop. In addition, the OIC carves out a 10-year program of action. What is this 10-year program of action? This calls for measures to combat all types of terrorism globally. We know for the fact that when it comes to terrorism, this has become a threat and a menace to the global security issues. So this program of action basically looks at combating the terrorism globally. It also talks about implementing social schemes to eliminate two-thirds of the extreme poverty, spurring industrialization, investment, trade and overall economic and social growth among the member states. So these are the prominent features when it comes to this charter. How does this function? What is the structure of the OIC? First, what we have at the top of the hierarchy happens to be the Islamic Summit. This is where it composes of kings and heads of the state, and these are the supreme authority of the organization. So this is convened every 2 years. What do? They deliberate on some of the important policy divisions, provide guidance on issues relevant to the organization, and consider issues of concern of the member states. So all those issues that are boggling these countries will be taken up by the Islamic Summit, and basically you would have the head of the states and the kings and the monarchs who will discuss what are the issues that are concerning all the members of the OIC. Followed by this in the hierarchy, what we have is the Council of the Foreign States, and this happens to be the chief decision making body and meets annually to decide on how to implement the OIC's general policies. In addition, this council also appoints for a period of 5 years the Secretary General, who is the Chief Administrative Officer of the grouping. So the Secretary General basically looks at the implementation. You have the Islamic Summit, which would be able to take up concerns and issues with respect to the members, but you have the Secretary General, which will follow it up with the implementation of the decisions. They basically implement it, but the ultimate decisions will be taken by the Islamic Summit, which is composed of state leaders as well as the monarchs. How will the membership work? When you consider the membership, United Nations members with Muslim majority would be able to join the organization. The membership is to be ratified with full consensus at the OIC's Council of the Foreign Ministers. The same provisions also apply even for the observer status as well. How will the decision be taken? So whenever we speak about an organization, what the organization will have to decide is on the voting premise. So when a decision has to be accepted or not, whether that decision has to be adopted or not, what if this decision is right or wrong, all of this will require a particular parameter. So how will it work in this OIC? When it comes to the OIC, what you require is a quorum defined by the presence of two-thirds of the member states, and then all these decisions will be taken on the basis of consensus. So if consensus is not applicable, then two-thirds of the members will have to come together. They have to be present and voting. So if consensus is not available, that is when two-third majority of the members present and voting will be taken into picture. How does the finances work? Let's say, for example, we have number of organizations. These organizations will have an administrative personnel. You would also require the buildings as well. You would also have daily operations as well. So what they require is the finances. So these finances will have to be contributed by the member countries to the OIC. So basically the OIC is financed by the member states proportionate to their national income. In case they do not contribute to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, in that particular case, voting rights can also be suspended as well. So what we have understood is with respect to the membership, the decision protocol, and also with respect to the financing as well. Is India part of the OIC? India is not part of the OIC. When we consider India, India had expressed its desire to be a member in OIC during its formation in the year 1969. But this was bitterly opposed by Pakistan. India also has a significant minority population of Muslims as well, but Pakistan's opposition to India's entry has prevented it from being part of this body. Why is Pakistan opposing? Pakistan argues that India's entry will violate a rule of the OIC that a state that wishes to be part of OIC should not have conflicts with any member state. So according to Pakistan, since most of the decision has to be on the basis of consensus, Pakistan is not allowing India to enter this organization. Why? Because according to Pakistan, Pakistan has issues with India. It has issues with respect to Jammu and Kashmir. So we have conflict with Pakistan. So Pakistan feels since India has conflict with Pakistan, according to the rules of the OIC, countries having conflict cannot be part of the OIC. Since Pakistan is already a member, it has conflict with India, so India cannot be part of OIC, says Pakistan. Added to it, Pakistan also feels that if India becomes part of OIC, it may take the sway along with it. Multiple other countries may start listening to India as well. So it has the fear and also an apprehension that other countries may fall in line with India and may not listen to Pakistan, which is why Pakistan is obstructing or not allowing India to be part of the OIC. Despite all this, we also have the former External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj, who addressed the OIC plenary of foreign ministers in Abu Dhabi as a guest of honor. Previously, the invitation was also extended by UAE's Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah Zayed Al Nahyan, and in 2018, Bangladesh had also proposed India be given the observer status at the OIC considering its sizable population, a move which received support from Turkey as well, but was opposed by Pakistan. And we did discuss why Pakistan opposes it, and as a result, what we have is India not part of this particular organization. So Pakistan basically fears that India's involvement in the grouping could influence other countries' opinion. As a result, it is not accepting India to be part of this organization. What are the criticisms with respect to this organization? The first major criticism is with respect to the human right violations. So this organization points out issues with respect to human right violations in multiple other countries, but it does not speak about human right violations in its own countries. If there are countries which is part of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, if there are countries which do not respect the human rights, this organization in public has not spoken about such countries. Let's say for example, even in West Asia as well, there are a lot of crises. One with respect to Yemen, there is also hegemonic war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. There have been violations of human rights as well. Those countries have not been spoken about. So the first major criticism is that they speak about human right violations, respect for sovereignty and integrity with respect to other countries, but the same is not happening with respect to their own countries. OIC has also failed to establish a cooperative venture among all its members, and it does not take part in international politics or in the area of economic cooperation. So basically, this organization is largely restricted to arbitrating in conflicts where both parties are Muslims, but it has not taken care of the larger picture like climate change, so on and so forth. These are some of the criticisms with respect to this organization. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Afghan's women rights which are at risk. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We recently had the Afghanistan's interior minister who went on to say that women, especially girls who are studying in the secondary education schools, would now be able to attend schools in Afghanistan. But this is where it points out to the bleak picture, the women right violations that have been existing in Afghanistan. So this article here is primarily focusing about some of the issues and concerns with respect to the women in Afghanistan. If you look into the statistics, female participation in Afghanistan's labor force had climbed from around 15% in 2009 to nearly 22% in 2019. When we speak about war on Afghanistan from the year 2001, which was initiated by United States of America, maybe to a larger extent they were not able to come up and reimpose that faith when it comes to the Afghanistan politics. But one thing that changed with the Western countries coming into Afghanistan is that women were able to actively participate in their daily affairs. Women played important roles in the government, parliament, media, health and education sectors, and also in the civil society. Though the Western world, which was interfering with Afghanistan, was not able to change the political affiliations and the political management, but it was able to bring women into the political setup in parliament and in the provincial councils of Kandahar, Nangarhar, Badakistan, Herat, Balk and others. Young women took grave risk in political participation and mobilization. This basically means that despite the Western world trying to bring in peace in terms of the political structure, which they were not able to, but all that they were able to do is empower the women. They have carved out spaces for themselves in the conflict ridden patriarchal structure. They were given opportunities and they became the enablers of change in Afghanistan. But of late, what we have is issues and concerns in Afghanistan. So the minute United States of America and the Western powers withdrew from Afghanistan, the women who were able to take advantage, who were empowered over a period of time, have become the major sufferers when it comes to Afghanistan. A report from the International Labour Organization in January 2022 found that Afghan women's employment levels fell by an estimated 16% in third quarter of 2021 compared with 6% for men. By mid 2022, women's employment is expected to be 21%, lower than before the Taliban takeover if current conditions continue. So this basically means that women have become the major sufferers when it comes to Afghanistan. What are the concerns with respect to this issue in Afghanistan? When we look into Afghanistan, what exactly happened? You had the United States of America, which wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan. So what do? They start speaking with Afghanistan's Taliban. They wanted to make sure that if Taliban does come into picture, there are certain paradigms that are established. What was the first paradigm? The first thing that they wanted to do was the Taliban also speak to the government, and there is adjustment and also power sharing agreement between Taliban and the government. So United States of America spoke to Taliban, and the first parameter was about sharing of power with the government. The second was with respect to that if there are any terrorist organizations, these should not be allowed to reap benefits in Afghanistan. So Taliban was also said that if there are any other terrorist organizations that are present, they should not be allowed to operate in Afghanistan is the second agenda between United States of America and Taliban. The third is also about swapping of some of these terrorists who were also in prisons. So if there are these prisoners who are present in the Afghanistan prison, they should be released. It was the third agreement between United States of America as well as Taliban. All of this was taken into picture, but the main area that if there are women who are already participating in the political system, if there are women who are engaged in some employment means and programs, they should also be allowed to operate. Women's rights should also be respected. That was not discussed as part of this particular program. So the first major concern is that United States of America did not speak about the protection of the rights of the women, and ultimately this was hardly emphasized, and now they have become the major sufferers. Afghan women representatives did come up in the intra-Afghan dialogue in Doha as well. They did make the representation as well, but over a period of time they have not been represented in any of the political agenda. As per the World Bank in 2019, 36% of the teachers in the country were women, the highest number for 20 years, but most female educators have been forced out of the work by the Taliban's ban on education for the girls in March 2022. By the end of 2021, fewer than hundreds of Kabul's 700 female journalists were still working. This clearly points out that women are not allowed to work in Afghanistan, and as a result, they are the ones who are the major sufferers. What about those women who were the breadwinners for the family? Let's assume they are the only ones who are working for the family. There are no men in that particular family. So who will be the breadwinners if employment opportunities are snatched away from this particular woman? Added to it, in case there are women, these women are asked to stay indoors as well. They also forbid women from venturing out if they were not accompanied by a male relative. So if they were not accompanied by their men or their male relative, they cannot also venture outside, making an all-covering burqa mandatory for the women. So what they wear is up to them, but what they are imposing is mandatory burqa on the women. So can we say that Taliban 2 is better than Taliban 1? No. The answer is no. Initially, when Taliban 2 came over, it took control of Afghanistan. They tried to appease the world because they wanted finances and they also wanted international credibility as well. But over a period of time, Taliban 2 is equivalent to Taliban 1. So what is the way forward? As of now, when you look into the international media, it is only focusing on Ukraine. But in the near future, they should also start focusing on the women right issues that women are facing in Afghanistan, and ultimately the international countries will also have to come together and make sure that these rights of the women are reimposed in the Taliban rule. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, starting afresh, how women at Tihar jail are upskilling, breaking stereotypes. The article here is speaking about women empowerment in jails. What is a prison? A prison is a correctional facility meant to house all those individuals who break the law. So the purpose of prison is reformative in nature. So we have a justice delivery system which believes in reforming people. So all those individuals who have committed an illegal offense, if they are thrown thrown behind bars, they will have to be reformed and ultimately they have to be sent back to the society. But when it comes to issues in the jail, we have multiple issues with respect to the women. There is severe lack of female staff, which includes guards, officers, doctors, nurses, so on and so forth. Accommodation arrangements are often inadequate. This is also exasperated by severe number of people who are present in the prisons as well. There is inadequate number of toilets, bathrooms, and basic preconditions for the sanitation and hygiene. There is insufficient water and menstrual hygiene as well. Female medical personnel are not enough when it comes to the prisons, and at the same time, nutrition, which is closely linked to the health, is also particularly concerned when it comes to the females who are residing in the prisons. These are some of the issues with respect to the women in the prison. But despite all these issues and concerns, what we have is a ray of hope. And in the prisons where they are insulated, there are some people who are also planning to reform them. So Tihar jail number 6 is home to over 400 women prisoners who engage themselves in running a full-time kitchen and an in-house beauty parlor while also attending to tailoring, embroidery classes, so on and so forth. So these women who have number of issues in jail are given a ray of hope. These women, as I initially told you, have to be reformative. So they have to be reformed and they would be brought back into our world as well. So once they come back to the normal world, what they also require is the skill set, because they have to take care of themselves. So what these people are also helped with is tailoring as well as embroidery classes. So there are issues in the prisons, but at the same time they are also being empowered, because if they come back to the normal life, they would be able to take care of themselves. If we speak about the women staff assistants, they are also empathetic to all these women who are in the prisons. They are provided periodic counseling as well. They are sent to reformation and welfare activities as well. And in case there are women who also have children, these authorities have also provided monetary assistance as well. So despite all these issues and concerns that are present for the women in the prisons, there have been number of empowerment schemes and programs that have been taken, and one of it is about educating them. The other is about providing the required skill set so that once they are released from the jails, they would be able to take care of themselves. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Pakistan inclusion in the Financial Action Task Force grey list has a major impact on its economy. Comment. Why was the Organization of Islamic Cooperation established? What has been its role in the international arena? So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.